Good evening and welcome to our tonight's installment of Theta Tau Thursdays. My name is Jim Gaffney. I'm the Executive Director of the Theta Tau Professional Engineering Fraternity. And tonight's program, Building Your Network Part 2, is with Adrienne Arndt, our National Volunteer Director. So without any further ado, we will bring her on to get started.
Thanks, Jim. Good evening, everybody. As Jim alluded to, tonight we're going to be talking about part 2 of our 2-part series on mentoring. I'll go over a brief introduction of myself for the folks that weren't on last week. And then I will go into how to initiate and reinvest in mentoring relationships. I've got a few examples and personal stories and tips that you'll get to hear, just kind of some of my personal experiences. And then we'll wrap up with questions at the end. So a little bit about who I am. Again, my name is Adrienne Arndt. I think I mentioned this last week, but please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn name is Adrienne Arndt, as is displayed on the slide there. I've been sharing a lot of my personal stories and experiences in hopes that it might resonate with some of the folks that are out there watching this. I know I've learned a lot from a ton of people that I've connected with on LinkedIn, and I just really want to make sure that folks out there know I can be a resource for them. A few folks reached out after last week, and it was great hearing from them. And I look forward to connecting with more of you. So just wanted to get that sort of housekeeping out of the way. As far as my professional background goes, I graduated in 2011 from the University of Pennsylvania, Tau Gamma chapter. Got my degree in mechanical engineering. Had no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated, but within about a year, I started working as an industrial engineer with a cosmetics company in New Jersey. I also, at that time, started volunteering as the Atlantic Regional Director. After a couple of years, I was able to move back to my hometown of Philadelphia, where I started working with a company called Optimize, doing sales operations consulting in sort of a software development type of a role. I ended up wrapping up as the Atlantic Regional Director in 2016. And then in 2017 and 2018, did a couple of ad hoc volunteer stints. One as the Leadership Academy facilitator, and then again as a convention breakout speaker in 2018. 2018 was a pretty big year for me, both professionally and for Theta Tau. The picture right there, that's from my going away party with my folks. We had a big party just because I was relocating from Philadelphia and moving across the country to Dallas when I started working with Credera, which is my current company, as a data and analytics consultant. I'm really, really enjoying that, really enjoyed the move. I talked a little bit about that last week. And then I also started as the volunteer director during the summer of 2018 as well. So that was a big year for me. So last week's content really focused on why having a network is important, what your network should kind of look like and what my network kind of looks like. This week, I wanted to shift a little bit towards, okay, well, how do I, maybe initiate some of those conversations with people that I'd like to incorporate into my network? And then how do I make sure that I'm reinvesting in those relationships and following up and staying in touch with those people? So I can't take credit for this tweet. I'm not really on Twitter, but luckily, my Theta Tau big brother, Xander, who you'll hear more about a few slides later, he sent me this tweet about mentoring, and it really resonated with me, and I thought it would really resonate with this audience tonight. So I just wanted to kind of share this because this is kind of the headline for what this presentation is, right? So it's, find people who've helped you, let them know how they've helped you, and stay in touch with them and help them. And that, that's really kind of the simple kind of headline level of what we're going to talk about tonight. I am going to focus more on the how to stay in touch and help them portion. That's why I've got that kind of outline, but just wanted to kind of make sure that message is really getting through here tonight. Something I talked a lot about last week, be open-minded. I truly believe you can learn something from everyone you meet. And I think having that mindset really opens a lot of doors to potential mentors, friends, colleagues, people you might not necessarily talk to. Having that mindset can really help. Also asking questions. I mean, something simple like, what piece of career advice do you wish you'd received, earlier? Something simple like that. I think I've asked that to a ton of folks that have ended up being really good mentors for me. That can really open a lot of doors. And also, I think focusing on being a good listener, not being the one to kind of monopolize time, especially when you're talking about people who are a lot farther along in their career than yours. You find that, you'll learn a lot more when you're actually doing more of the listening than the asking and the talking. This third bullet here, I'm going to kind of combine the third one and the last one a little bit. I've got just kind of a quick story here about how it's important to be purposeful and specific about what you want out of some of these relationships. I mentioned that I worked at a cosmetics company, Shiseido, for a couple of years when I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And our company did not have a formal mentoring program, and I really wanted a mentor. So I actually spent a summer and I asked each of our directors out to lunch with me individually. So I did one a week for, like the course of the summer. And I asked each of them if they would be my mentor, and they all said no. So I'm definitely used to like disappointment and some of the stuff like not quite working out. So I've learned a few things along the way. But looking back, I think part of the reason that they all said no, one, it wasn't really part of our company culture. It was, an extra thing I was asking them to do on top of their day job. Most people don't really like that. And I was super generic about it. I didn't really know what I wanted. I didn't really know what kind of help I needed. So kind of learn from that lesson and learn from me and be specific when you do need help and when you do reach out to people. And then also, you're going to hear a lot of stories from me tonight about some interesting ways that I've met some folks. I really think that that's kind of a core lesson that I've learned over the years is, whether it's a referral, whether it's like your family, there's so many different ways that you can meet people. And I know for me as an introvert, I struggle sometimes to go to functions where I know there's going to be a lot of people. But a lot of the times that I have done that and I have put myself out there, I've ended up meeting some really cool people that have been friends, mentors, just other folks that I've kept in touch with over the years. And they've all been really just fruitful relationships. And then kind of on the reinvestment side, a couple of things that I want to kind of talk through here. One, I talked through the kind of the map of where your contacts live last week. If you haven't done that exercise, highly recommend just get kind of a visual picture of where folks are. As I'm going to kind of talk about in the next slide, going through an exercise when I was home for the holidays last year, and then also an exercise I'm sort of going through right now as I'm planning a trip back to Philly next week. Just knowing like who's still in Philly, just from the last holidays to right now, my list has changed a little bit. So just being aware of where people are, meeting your mentors, especially, but your friends and colleagues and other folks, meeting them geographically where they are is so important. That goes such a long way towards showing them how much you value the relationship. And, for people that potentially don't have a lot of time on their hands, that might make them a little bit more willing to make time to meet up with you when you are in town type of thing. And obviously I realize kind of where we are with COVID and some of the travel and some of my advice may fly in the face of like what's safe in today's environment. A lot of this is geared towards a non-COVID environment. So kind of keep that in mind as you're listening to me kind of talk through some of this stuff. Also, just be purposeful about when you're actually reaching out to folks and who you want to reach out to, and focus on having, I would say really quality interactions. It's not so much about kind of checking people off of a list, although an exercise I do recommend everyone tries is, I don't really have a good name for it, but if you kind of make a list of all the people your friends, your mentors, your colleagues, your Theta Tau brothers, whoever it is, and then you kind of order your list based on, okay, if I was in the same location as these folks today, who would I most want to see? Put those people at the top. And keep an eye on how that list maybe changes over time. It might be different year over year, but it might also be the same. And see how good of a job you do at actually staying in touch with those people. Because in theory, those are the people you should really want to be staying in touch with, want to be seeing, as often as you can. See how well you do there. Make those kind of the focal points whenever you go home. If you don't, if you're living somewhere that maybe isn't your hometown, or if you're living kind of separately from your family. And then finally, practice makes perfect. As I said before, I'm an introvert. A lot of this stuff was uncomfortable to me at first and when I was younger. And I've just done it a bunch. It's become very habitual for me at this point, and I think that's why it's become very comfortable. And it was kind of hard for me as I was going through kind of putting some of this presentation together, because a lot of it just feels like stuff I kind of just do at this point. But I try to kind of break it down, put some kind of steps and tips together so that hopefully it's easy enough for some of y'all to implement. All right, so I've alluded to this. I think I teased this last week. I've alluded to this already a little bit this week. So I mentioned that list of folks that, when you're trying to figure out how do I, make the most of the time if I'm traveling somewhere or if I'm going home or, whatever the case may be, you've got a certain set of people that, hey, I really want to see them. And for me, it was a list of about 20 people as I was doing this last fall. And just try to be honest with like how much you can handle. So I knew I had 12 days. What you don't see in kind of my little schedule here is I had to work some of these days. So kind of having to put some of these things around work and around holidays and different things like that. One of the things that really helps me with having what I like to call the meaningful interactions, because you don't want to just be checking names off of a list. My big thing is I like to incorporate food. Obviously with COVID right now, it's hard to like go out to restaurants and stuff, but hopefully in a year or two, when that's a little bit easier, some of these tips will be a little more meaningful and timely. But as you can kind of see from my schedule here, there's brunch, there's lunch, there's dinners, there's a lot of things around food. I feel like that just adds kind of a casual nature to your discussions, and it really helps facilitate good conversation. And ultimately, that's what I'm after in any of these interactions. All right, getting into some of my personal stories with some folks. Again, I talked about Michelle last week. For those of you who didn't see that or are just kind of tuning in now, she's probably the oldest relationship or kind of longest term mentor that I've had over the course of kind of my life. I've known her about 14 years. She's a long-term family friend. I actually met her when I was in high school. My family used to dog sit for her. And she really wasn't more than just the woman who we dogs sat for a very long time. And my dad, in his infinite wisdom, said to me one day, Michelle's like a pretty good, like career-driven woman. Like you could probably learn a lot from her as somebody, who's just been really successful. And, you might want to like see if she has any advice or anything like that. And being a 16-year-old young woman, I was like, yeah, Dad, that's great, but no thanks, but no thanks. At some point, I don't know what happened. I was kind of like, what the heck? Like, let me reach out to Michelle, see if she wants to meet up for lunch or something. And we did, and my dad was right. It was, we had a great time. I don't even remember what we talked about. It was probably some things about college and my major and, deciding if I wanted to do engineering or something along those lines. But it almost didn't matter what we talked about. The conversation was so free flowing. I mean, she asked just really great open-ended questions, which, if there's almost nothing else you take away from today, ask open-ended questions. That's the easiest way to really spark good conversation with people, get to know them, get them to be invested in you, ask good open-ended questions. So I mean, mentors definitely don't, kind of walk around with signs saying like, I'll be your mentor over your head. You have to kind of be always sort of on the lookout for them. And luckily I had my dad to kind of nudge me in the direction there. And then just kind of the other note, I mean, outside of my family, Michelle's always the first person I call whenever I go home. We've been texting kind of earlier today about our plan for what we're going to do when I'm home next week. But, again, it's really about building those habits. It's, whenever I go home, like she's somebody that I, make time for, and she makes time for me. And it's just really, we always try to plan around food because that's just an easy way for us to connect. But try to really develop those habits with people so that, again, it shouldn't really feel like work. It should just feel like part of your routine, part of your schedule, something that's fun for both of you. So if Michelle's my probably longest running mentor relationship, I think Joanne is probably my shortest. I didn't actually meet Joanne in person until January of this year, so about 6 months ago. She does not work in my company, but I kind of met her through my company, Credera. she was putting on kind of a virtual lunch and learn type of presentation from our Houston office. And I remember, watching the live stream with a couple of my colleagues, and we were just so blown away by her presentation. I don't know if any of y'all have seen a TED Talk or something like that, where you're like, wow, I just have to know this person. Like, everything they're saying, it just really resonates with me. And I just, want to tell them how awesome I think they are and how much what they've been talking about has helped me and added good perspective for me. And that's exactly how I felt. And in the next slide, I'll go through a little bit more details about how I initiated the conversations and kind of the cadence and some more of the substance of what we talked about. But, I just think it's important that there's going to be amazing people like that in your organizations. There's going to be amazing people like that you kind of admire from afar. I know I, at first, didn't really want to reach out to her. I was a little afraid that, not being in the Houston office, not being, at her company, that she might kind of think like, oh, who's this rando person? Like, I don't have time for you. She's kind of a good example of, you never know. Sometimes people just, if you just tell them, you think that, hey, you really helped me. I really enjoyed your talk. Who knows where that can lead? And then I mentioned, stay up to date. Again, kind of going back to the map example, I knew Joanne was in Houston. In January, we had our Theta Tau national officer meeting in Houston. I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to actually finally meet her in person. We've just been texting and LinkedIn messaging for a couple of months. It took a little bit of work, but we were able to actually meet up in person, which was really awesome. And then a couple months later, right before all of the COVID stuff started, she was in Dallas, and we were able to meet up then as well. So definitely stay up to date with where they're located. Always be on the lookout for an opportunity, even if it's quick. It can really, I think, enhance your relationships a lot. So digging in just a little bit deeper, and one thing I kind of want to underscore here about kind of my process and kind of the communication pattern that we had. There's no one size fits all for a lot of these, right? A lot of this will depend on who you are, what your career ambitions are, what you want out of life, what your kind of personal style is. This is some of the stuff that's worked for me, and I hope that by sharing it, it can help some folks who are out there listening. But definitely not a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach. So I mentioned that Joanne was giving a lunch talk. There was, a handful of us in my office that were kind of watching. Again, just that was kind of all we could talk about that afternoon. It was like, oh man, Joanne said this, Joanne said that. Oh, she just seems so cool. She graduated from college in the late, I want to say 70s with a degree in engineering. So for those, young women who are watching this, who are thinking about kind of the ratio of, men to women in their engineering classes out there, or, maybe a couple of years ago in college, think about what it was back in the late 70s, early 80s, right? She was the only woman in a lot of situations. So just kind of hearing her talk through those experiences, hearing how she kind of grew in her career, started her own company, not that I have a lot of those aspirations, but it felt really cool to kind of hear that from a woman kind of to talk through that path. So I just reached out to her a couple of hours after her lunch and just kind of told her a lot of that. Again, I focused on, thanking her for kind of sharing her experience, letting her know how some of the advice she had shared had helped me in the past, how it had helped some of my colleagues. I did ask a couple of follow-up questions. I would say that one's probably optional. Just depending on if you have any, again, it's probably better to focus on the first two. But that's really kind of how it kind of started. And I wasn't expecting to hear from her, to be honest. I was a little surprised. She actually wrote me back on LinkedIn later that day. And then we just kind of started trading LinkedIn messages back and forth over the next week or so. And eventually she said, hey, we've been sending some pretty long, LinkedIn mails back and forth. Would you mind if we just had a conversation? And eventually we did. And, again, I tried to let her kind of take the lead on her preferences for communication. I think that's a really big thing to keep in mind when you're first starting some of these relationships, especially with people that are, more senior and further along in their careers. Being aware of what their preferences are as far as communication can mean a lot on their end. And then, we actually, she and I were just texting earlier this day, just talking about our, 4th of July and what we did and everything. And, the substance of our conversations has really, covered everything from the super kind of career focused. We talked about, how to bounce back from, if you get passed over from a promotion. But I also asked her, knowing she's originally from Oklahoma, just during all of this quarantine stuff, I had to get out of my apartment and wanted to take my dog somewhere for some good hikes. So I, asked her to give me some recommendations, and she obliged. So just wanted to kind of share kind of the timeline and just kind of the nuts and bolts of how that relationship kind of came about. And then I really wanted to share this example about my friend Morella, because I know a lot of my examples, both today and last week, are very focused on that sort of traditional, I think what people think of as that like formal mentor-mentee relationship. And, I kind of have this quote on there, like, not all of my friends are mentors, but all my mentors are friends. Like when I talk about kind of the, mentoring and kind of networking, I'm really referring to like that umbrella group of, mentors, friends, colleagues, coaches, professors, family. It's really kind of an all-encompassing term for me. Again, kind of going back to that, you can learn something from everybody. So just kind of having that mindset. So Morella's she's one of my really good friends. We've known each other about 5 years. And again, going back to my dad and all of his infinite wisdom. So he actually met her at like a family party. We've got kind of a weird connection through our like extended families. And he mentioned that Morella was new to Philadelphia. I had recently moved back to Philadelphia. He was like, oh, you two are the same age. Like you'd probably, be really good friends. Like go meet up with her and be friends. And again, you'd think I would have learned from the Michelle example, but it took me a little while. I kind of ignored him at first. But eventually I realized like, oh, there's this, restaurant I've been wanting to check out that's like right by where Morella lives. Like, let me see if she wants to go check it out. So again, kind of that food tie-in, like let's do something, casual, if nothing else, we could talk about whether we love or hate the food. So again, I have no idea what we talked about, but we had a great time. It was, my parents were totally right. Again, listen to your parents. But again, kind of this example that like, once you get out of college, it's really hard to meet people unless they, go to the same gym as you, or you work together, or they're in your apartment complex. Like the options for meeting people are so limited. I've relied, especially with my cross-country move, on the referrals, on friends of friends of friends, and just kind of those networks. And they've actually led to a lot of really good friendships like what I have Morella. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that example that, you never know where some of these relationships are going to spring up from, but just kind of be open, be yourself and be willing to kind of put yourself out there. And you never know, what might come up. All right, and finally, I wanted to do a little spotlight on my Theta topic brother, Xander. For those of y'all who are not aware, he's kind of the mastermind behind some of these virtual programming. So when we were kind of first talking about doing some content here, and I knew he was involved in the process, I wanted to do it because I really like working with him, and it was a good excuse to kind of spend some time with him and get some of that professional experience, but also have some fun. So I don't know if he remembers this or not, but the way that I actually met him, and I know a lot of people have kind of a similar story of like how they got to a Rush event or how they kind of came to learn about Theta Tau, which I think is one of the great things about our organization. But my freshman year roommate, whom I have not spoken to since she moved out after freshman year, she had a huge crush on Xander. And so she like dragged me, it was like the second or third week of college. She dragged me to a Rush event. I was like, who are these nerds that you want to go like hang out with for a couple of hours and eat pizza and all that I thought I was, above at the time. And it ended up being super fun. I think I met Xander there and I met a few other folks there and I really enjoyed it. She hated it. So she never ended up pledging and I did. And, it was meeting Xander during the Rush event, during pledge, having him be my big brother. I mean, having somebody like that who's, in your major, who, just kind of knows the lay of the land, can provide some of that advice and experience and all that was just so rewarding for me. And again, I kind of have that like say yes even when things are uncomfortable. I did not want to go to that event, but I'm so glad I did. I might not be here talking to y'all today if I didn't go to that first Rush event that she dragged me to. And then a little bit of a twist on, I keep referring back to that map of where geographically your mentors and your network are. A little bit of a twist on that is, so Xander and I have lived several thousands of miles apart for probably a decade at this point. So I don't have a lot of opportunities to get out to the West Coast, out to San Diego to see him in person. But one of the great things about being in the fraternity is, I can kind of keep an eye on like what projects he's working on, what stuff he's doing. And I can kind of plan like what volunteering opportunities I want to do based on wanting to work with him and just kind of having fun with Leadership Academy. And then again, kind of doing some of this content. So, look for ways not only to, go to where people are physically, but also to kind of help them and just to kind of be able to work with them. Because I know that's really enhanced my experience with the fraternity. All right, just to kind of conclude with some of those condensed tips that I've been talking about tonight. As you've heard from a number of my stories, you never know when you're going to meet somebody who changes your life and just ends up being a really great friend or mentor or whatever the case may be. Don't be afraid to say yes to some things, even though it might be uncomfortable. Be genuine. Definitely don't be afraid to be vulnerable. I think, those relationships really tend to flourish when you share things that, maybe you're like afraid of something or, you're unsure of something. And I think kind of sharing that with people in your network can really accelerate how quickly those relationships can develop. And then meet people where they are, again, physically, referring to that map I talked about, but also, how you get to know them. I mentioned, I like to use food as a good way to get to know people. I think it's great for creating those casual environments. Not everybody agrees with that. Sometimes it's better to do a volunteering experience. Sometimes it's better to play a sport. Like, figure out what works for you and just try to incorporate that into your different interactions. Don't get discouraged. I think I shared a couple of stories about being shot down and things not really working out. For every, Xander that I have, I've got a Jenny or a couple other folks where I tried kind of this approach and it didn't work. And sometimes that happens and, you just got to move on. And, it's not going to work out with everybody, but you remember and kind of really, I think, kind of shape the ones where it does work out. And then finally, just kind of, there's like that old improv saying, always be a good partner by saying yes. I think the same works with mentoring relationships and the other folks in your network. Never be afraid to say yes to something, whether it's, trying a new event, whether it's meeting new people, just kind of be willing to try new things. Alrighty, I think I've got, a couple of PSAs here. So as I've kind of plugged a little bit, being involved with Theta Tau volunteering has obviously been, a great thing for me as a professional, as someone, outside of my professional life. That's been a really big part of my life. If you're interested, volunteer at thetatau.org is the way to contact me as the volunteer director. Love to hear from y'all. Love to get you, plugged into something at the national level. We always need volunteers, so please reach out to me there. Additionally, we've got a partnership with Ambition in Motion, which actually sets you up with a mentor. So there's the link for that. And then this will all be available in the recording. So you'll be able to access that way. And then if you didn't see part 1, so if you're just joining us tonight, missed last week, that's okay. We've got the link right here. You can watch them in whatever order you prefer. All righty. Questions? How do you recommend you keep in touch with our networks during COVID-19? That's a good question. And I do realize a lot of the advice was kind of in a non-COVID world. I'm a big fan of the virtual, what's the Jackbox? Is that the games? I know it sounds super cheesy and everyone's probably like, I can't believe she said that. But I actually got together with a bunch of my high school friends a couple weeks ago. It was the first time I think more than 3 or 4 of us were, quote unquote, together in probably 10 years. And so that was just a really cool way I think we got 8 or 9 of us to actually all be together, all to reconnect. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to playing games like that, so I find that really fun. But I mean, you can do a virtual coffee. You can, cook dinner. That's actually one of the things my sister and I started doing was a virtual chop challenge, where we both like pick 4 ingredients and pick a meal that we're going to do, and we cook together over video chat and just kind of catch up. So there are different options. You can kind of virtualize some of the food things that I've mentioned. But it is hard right now. I'm not going to like sugarcoat the fact that it's easy. It's definitely hard. It's a bigger challenge as I'm thinking about going home next week and wanting to be mindful of not, getting people sick and putting anybody in danger of getting the disease or anything. So, yeah. What lessons from networking can we apply to fraternity recruitment? There's a couple that I highlighted in here that I think apply to both. I think that being genuine and vulnerable, I think that's a really big one. I think Fired Up has, again, sorry to like toot the company line of Fired Up, but I really like their questions. I actually use them a lot at work for different icebreakers and things. But their fun zone and their deep zone, I think kind of pull in that sort of, being genuine and being vulnerable. I think they kind of give you a good outlet for that. I think that, saying yes to things, not being afraid to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. If you think about going to your first, rush or recruitment event, it was probably an uncomfortable situation for you. I think being aware of that when you've got, new rushies and new, folks who are interested in joining the fraternity, just kind of have that empathy when you're talking to them. I think those are probably two of the bigger lessons that could be learned there. How do you identify good candidates to be mentors or mentees? That's interesting. I don't have a lot of experience with the latter. I think if I did, thinking through some of the things that I've heard from my mentors about things that they wish some of their like work or more formal mentees did, ask people if they ever had, and this is, I think, especially applies in a work situation, but don't wait for people to bring feedback to you. Be proactive, whether it's, your direct supervisor, if you have a formal mentor, just other colleagues, folks that you work with. Be proactive in asking for their feedback. A lot of times people want to tell you things, but they're either afraid of how you're going to take it, or they don't want to overstep because they're maybe not your formal mentor or your formal manager. So if you're the one who's being proactive, it shows, hey, I'm willing to take constructive, feedback or criticism, and I'm willing to act on it. And it kind of takes that burden away from them. So I would say keep that in mind. Good candidates to be mentors. Honestly, I think it all comes back to, what can you learn from somebody? I believe, I can learn something from everyone. And a lot of it boils down to like how much
All right, sorry about that. We appear to have lost Adrian's feed. So we appreciate everyone viewing tonight. We will ask Adrian to record the last few minutes of her broadcast and put them in the playback. Our next Theta Tau Thursday event will be next Thursday, July the 16th at 9 p.m. here on YouTube. And that topic will be using social networks to find your next job, and that will feature Blaine Donahue, who is one of our national officers. So thank you again for viewing, and we hope to see you next week.